1945. A United States Army forward base somewhere in liberated Europe. A soldier named William, 23 years old, from Ohio, is standing in a small shop near the base perimeter. On the shelf in front of him is a small red folding knife with a white cross on it. It costs almost nothing. He picks it up, unfolds the blade, then the can opener, then the small screwdriver. He has never seen anything like it. He buys 3. One for himself, one for his father, one for his brother, back in Akron. He does not know the German name for it. He cannot pronounce the word on the side, Offiziersmesser. He calls it what it is to him, the Swiss Army knife. When William goes home to Ohio, the knife goes with him. He shows it to his father. His father shows it to the men at the factory where he works. Those men tell their wives tell their neighbors. Within a decade, the name William gave the knife, the Swiss Army knife, will be in every dictionary in America and every hardware store on Main Street. And the man who built it, Karl Elsener, will have been dead for 27 years. This is not simply the story of a knife. It is the story of a Swiss cutler who nearly went bankrupt winning a military contract, invented the world's most recognizable multi-tool as a desperate business pivot, named his company after his dead mother, and never lived to see American soldiers accidentally make it the most famous pocket tool in human history. In July of 2017, Victorinox celebrated a number so large it requires a pause to absorb. 500 million pocket knives manufactured in a single family's Swiss factory since 1884. 500 million, all from one workshop in the village of Ibach. All from one idea a 31-year-old Swiss cutler had while watching soldiers struggle with equipment they could not properly maintain. This is the story of Karl Elsener, pronounced Karl Elsener, the son of a Swiss hatmaker, who opened a knife workshop with his mother's support, nearly lost everything to a German price war, invented a knife the Swiss Army never ordered, and accidentally created the most globally recognized tool in history. 4 generations of his family have run the same company in the same Swiss village for 140 years. NASA astronauts carry it into space. The Museum of Modern Art in New York has one in its permanent collection. George W. Bush visited the factory in Ibach personally in 1997, and none of it was planned. None of it was inevitable. Almost all of it nearly never happened at all. But here is what the official company history never quite captures. Karl Elsener did not create the Swiss Army knife to become famous. He created it because he was about to go out of business and he needed to find something the German manufacturer competing for his contract could not copy fast enough to beat him. The knife that ended up on 1945 soldiers' belts across Europe was not the original contract knife. It was the rescue knife, the second knife. The one Karl invented in a state of near desperation in 1896, 2 years after the first contract, nearly destroyed him. Without the desperation, there is no officer's knife. Without the officer's knife, there is no Swiss Army knife. Without the Swiss Army knife, there is no Victorinox. The entire 140-year empire traces back to one man running out of options and refusing to quit. Karl Elsener was born on October 9th, 1860, in the canton of Schwyz, in the heart of central Switzerland, the oldest of 4 children. His father, Balthasar Elsener, was a hatmaker. His mother, Victoria Elsener, born Ott, was by all accounts the force behind Karl's ambitions, the woman who believed in what her son could build before he had built anything at all. The Switzerland of Karl's childhood was not the prosperous alpine nation tourists would recognize today. In the 1860s and 1870s, Switzerland was one of the poorer nations of Europe. Many Swiss families sent their sons abroad to find work in France and Germany, where manufacturing was more developed and wages were higher. Karl himself completed his knife-making apprenticeship in Zug and then spent years as a journeyman craftsman, moving through the knife-making centers of France and Germany, learning everything he could about how the best cutlery in Europe was made. When Karl returned to Switzerland in 1884, he was 23 years old, and he carried everything he had learnt in those foreign workshops back to the village of Ibach. His mother Victoria actively supported him in setting up his first workshop, a small factory that manufactured knives and surgical instruments, powered by a water wheel on the river Todelbach. He employed roughly 30 people. The workshop made good knives, but it was a small operation in a small village, and Karl needed something larger to build toward. In 1891, the larger thing arrived, and it nearly killed him. The Swiss army had decided to equip every soldier with a folding knife compact enough to carry on the body and capable of opening canned food and maintaining the Schmidt-Rubin rifle, the service rifle of the era, which required a specific screwdriver for disassembly. The initial contract for 15,000 knives had been given to a German manufacturer named Wester & Company from Solingen, because no Swiss company had production capacity large enough to fill the order. Karl Elsener read the contract announcement and felt something that he could not set aside. The Swiss army should be carrying Swiss knives, not German ones. He established the Association of Swiss Master Cutlers, gathered other small Swiss workshops under one organizational umbrella, and won the production contract away from the German manufacturer. By the end of 1891, Karl had delivered his first major supply of soldiers' knives to the Swiss army. He should have been celebrating. He was not. The opportunity was this: the Swiss army contract represented guaranteed volume that could sustain and grow a knife workshop beyond what civilian retail sales could support. The insight was this: Karl understood that Swiss national pride would favor a Swiss manufacturer over a German one if a Swiss manufacturer could compete on quality and delivery. The execution. Karl organized the Swiss Master Cutlers Association to pool production capacity, won the contract, and retooled his Ibach workshop to produce the Model 1890 soldier's knife at military specification. The result: Karl won the contract, delivered the knives, and established Victorinox as an official supplier to the Swiss army. The problem it created: Wester & Company from Solingen did not accept losing the contract gracefully. They launched a price war. They cut their prices below what Karl's domestic production costs would allow him to match. By the mid-1890s, Karl Elsener was on the verge of bankruptcy. He had won the contract, and it was destroying him. Here is where it gets interesting. In 1896, with his finances deteriorating, Karl made a decision that had nothing to do with the military contract and everything to do with survival. He looked at the soldier's knife, the Model 1890, and asked himself what a better knife would look like. Not a cheaper knife, not a lighter knife, a knife that did more. A knife that offered tools the soldier's version did not have. A knife with a blade, a screwdriver, a can opener, a corkscrew, and a special spring mechanism that allowed tools to be mounted on both sides of the handle using the same spring, making the whole assembly lighter and more compact than anything that existed. He called it the officer's knife, the Offiziersmesser, because its combination of elegance and functionality seemed suited to an officer's use. He patented it in 1897. The Swiss army never ordered the officer's knife. They kept ordering the simpler, cheaper soldier's version. But something else happened that Karl did not anticipate. Civilians noticed the officer's knife. Officers who purchased it privately showed it to colleagues who purchased their own. Travelers who carried it across Europe told other travelers. The knife that Karl Elsener had invented as a desperate business pivot to give his company a product the Germans could not immediately undercut on price, began building a commercial reputation that the military contract had not. And this is the detail that nobody in the official history mentions clearly enough. By 1897, Karl Elsener had stabilized his company not because the Swiss army gave him more business, but because the officer's knife had opened an entirely separate market. The civilian market for a high-quality multifunction folding tool, a market that did not yet know it existed. That needed his invention to discover what it was missing. Karl Elsener served on the Cantonal Council of Schwyz from 1912 to 1918. He was a conservative politician, a civic leader, a man who understood his responsibilities to the community around him as well as to his workshop. On December the 26th, 1918, Karl Elsener died. He was 58 years old. He had lived just long enough to see his company reach approximately 100 employees and national recognition inside Switzerland. He died before stainless steel changed his knife forever. He died before American soldiers gave it a name the whole world would use. He died, as far as history is concerned, too soon. In 1909, the year Karl's mother Victoria died, Karl had named his company Victoria in her honor, and registered the white cross and shield emblem that would become one of the most recognized logos on Earth. In 1921, Karl's son combined the word Victoria with the French word for stainless steel, inoxidable, and created the name that has defined the company ever since, Victorinox. Karl Elsener II introduced full automation into the workshop in 1931, commissioning Braun Boveri to set up the world's first all-electric hardening plant in Aibach. The quality standard Karl had set by hand in 1884 was now being maintained by machine with greater consistency than hand production had ever achieved. Then came World War II, and with it, the moment that changed everything. American soldiers stationed in Europe during and after the war encountered the Victorinox knife in local shops and at military supply points. The Swiss, neutral throughout the war, continued producing and selling the knife commercially throughout the conflict. American GIs who found it were immediately impressed by its quality and its versatility. They bought them by the thousands, packing them into kit bags alongside everything else they were taking home. And when they tried to tell people back in America what they had found, they could not pronounce the German name, Offiziersmesser. It was impossible. So they called it what made sense to them, the Swiss Army knife. That name, given by American soldiers who could not read German, spread through every English-speaking country in the world within a decade, and eventually back into official Swiss usage. The American market that followed was extraordinary. By the 1950s, the United States Army was ordering Victorinox knives for sale in its post-exchange stores across American bases worldwide. Former President Lyndon Johnson, who served from 1963 to 1969, gave away more than 4,000 Victorinox knives, embossed with his personal signature, turning a Swiss pocket knife into a presidential calling card and introducing it to thousands of American dignitaries, politicians, and foreign leaders. In 1978, NASA ordered its first 50 astronaut knives, officially designating the Swiss Army knife as standard equipment for American space missions. Canadian astronaut Chris Hadfield later wrote that he would never leave the planet without one, after using his to open a stuck hatch on the Mir space station when every other tool had failed. In 1960, the Soviet Union shot down a United States U-2 spy plane over Russian airspace. Among the items displayed to the world press from the wreckage, a small red folding knife with a white cross. The Soviets announced it was CIA spy equipment. It was a Victorinox Swiss Army knife. The global press coverage was not what the Soviets intended. It made the knife internationally famous as the tool of choice for secret agents, heroes, and spies. Sales accelerated. In the 1980s, a television series called MacGyver premiered in America, featuring a hero who solved seemingly impossible problems using minimal equipment, most often a Swiss Army knife. The show ran for 7 seasons. It is estimated to have been seen by hundreds of millions of people worldwide. The Swiss Army knife became synonymous with resourcefulness, preparation, and practical intelligence. Advertisers across every industry adopted the phrase as a metaphor. The Swiss Army knife of helicopters, the Swiss Army knife of business software, the Swiss Army knife of kitchen appliances. Karl Elsener had invented an officer's folding knife in a Swiss village in 1896. By the 1980s, his invention had become a universal metaphor for versatility itself. But that is not the crazy part. Through all of this, through the American GIs and the presidential gifts and the NASA missions and the MacGyver television series, the factory stayed in Aibach. The family stayed in charge. The same village where Karl Elsener had set up his water wheel workshop in 1884 was still producing knives 140 years later. While other manufacturers relocated production to low-wage countries in Asia, Victorinox stayed in Switzerland, with more than half of its 2,100 employees still working in Aibach. By 2017, the factory that Karl built with roughly 30 employees was producing 45,000 Swiss Army knives every single day, 90,000 household and professional knives daily, a total of 500 million pocket knives manufactured in 133 years of continuous production. The Victorinox Foundation holds 90% of the company's share capital. The remaining 10% belongs to a non-profit foundation named for Karl and Elise Elsener. There are no outside shareholders pressing for quarterly returns. There is no publicly traded stock, creating pressure to cut costs by offshoring production. There is the same family, in the same village, running the same company. Karl Elsener started with his mother's support in 1884, making the same knife, to the same standard, for the same reason Karl made it in the first place. Today, a Victorinox knife sits in the permanent design collection of the Museum of Modern Art in New York. A Victorinox knife is standard equipment on every NASA space mission. In 120 countries, the small red knife with the white cross is the first thing many travelers pack and the last thing professional tradespeople would leave behind. George W. Bush visited the factory in Ibach personally. The German army, the Swiss army, the militaries of more than 20 countries have all adopted versions of it as regulation equipment. Karl Elsener died in 1918 at 58 years old, before American soldiers gave his knife a name, before it went to space, before 500 million units had been made, before 4 generations of his family carried his workshop into the 21st century as one of the most recognized brands on Earth. He named his company after his mother, Victoria. She had been there at the beginning, selling his first knives from her hat shop in Ibach. She had believed in him before the Swiss army gave him the contract, before the officer's knife, before the price war and the near bankruptcy and the desperate invention that saved everything. Somewhere tonight, in 120 countries, a person is reaching into a pocket or a bag and pulling out a small red knife. They do not know the story of the Swiss cutler's son who almost went bankrupt and invented this tool as a last resort. They do not know that American soldiers who could not pronounce one German word gave it the name the whole world now uses. They just know that when something needs to be fixed, when a bottle needs to be opened, when a wire needs to be cut, when a screw is stripped and the right driver is nowhere else to be found, this is the tool that was built for exactly that moment. Karl Elsener built it 140 years ago. It is still in production in the same Swiss village. It has never been improved enough to require replacement. Some tools are simply finished the moment they are invented.